Yeah, there was all pride was gone in that moment. We have never experienced that before or since, thank God. But it was literally just this constant bypassing one another, hoping that we didn't poop our pants or the floor or anything else. So there you have it.
Yeah, I don't think you ever get comfortable like going to the bathroom like that in front of each other, but it's gonna happen, and we just laughed. That's what was funny, was that while it was happening, even while she was like brushing past me, she was just like giggling as you, because it was like we knew it was just like, I hope I make it, and I was just like, I hope you do too, not on me. It was hilarious. It was funny. We laughed really really hard.
Wow. Hey, we're real here. Is there a what?
Yeah. No, the White House grill's bomb. I'd still go back, but I would probably go. I would. We haven't actually been back.
You guys live closer now, so
we do. Yeah.
That's advantageous.
It was very blessed. I think it was too blessed. It was just it completely cleansed us. It was too blessed.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. It's like Jesus cleanses our heart and the White House cleanses our bowels.
He's a good father.
Goodness. Wow. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and just get real here. Yeah. Okay, I would love for you guys to kind of like take us deeper. Tell us a little bit about your story. More so like maybe kind of how you were raised, what that looked like. Maybe kind of your relationship with your parents, and eventually we'd love to talk about your relationship with your father growing up.
My parents pastor, and still do. They were originally from Greenville, South Carolina, and my parents pastor. I have four older sisters. They're all in ministry, and they're all back serving at the church in Greenville. I believe my parents have been pastoring there 43 years now at the same church. So it's pretty amazing. So I was raised in an amazing home. I'm still pretty tight with all my family, and we don't talk a ton just because our lives are busy in different ways, and we're also on very different time. They're 3 hours ahead of us. But my relationship with them is beautiful. Pretty much everybody in my family is musical, and my dad plays like 20-something instruments. My mom's probably like the best piano player I've ever heard, and I have sisters that just like sing the paint off the walls. So we're all super musical, and we've all served in the church to some degree, pretty much our whole lives. So, pretty awesome family. Taught me to love Jesus, modeled Jesus my whole life.
My parents, I also grew up in Greenville, South Carolina. My parents are actually both Cuban. My dad was born in Cuba, came over when he was 3. So everybody looking from the outside would have said I grew up in a really awesome family. We went to church every Sunday, and my dad was an over-the-road truck driver, so he really would be gone for several months at a time, and then when he would come home, it would just be for a few days. And so my mom was really, during that time when my dad was over the road, she really was more of a single parent. And so she took us to church. Every Sunday we actually went to Aslan's parents' church, and so, looking at it, everybody thought, our family was great, but we were very dysfunctional. My dad was very abusive physically. He was sexually abusive to me. And so my family, none of my siblings or my mom knew for a long time. And so I grew up really just like really unseen, and just manipulated. My mother had major like codependency issues because my dad wasn't around, the person that she really leaned on and relied on, and basically had me do everything and was also her like emotional support. And so there was a really unhealthy codependency where I felt like I was more of a parent, more of a spouse, than a child. And so I grew up really fast, and also felt very isolated because I was by myself in this brokenness, until I became an adult. And I'm much older than my siblings, 15 years older than my youngest sibling, who I raised, because my mom was very sick for many years when she had him. And so I really took care of all my siblings. And and so there was just a lot of brokenness growing up until things kind of came out into the light. And so Jesus came in, and when there was, it talks about in Scripture, when things are left in darkness, it's like the devil's playground. But when things are exposed and come into the light, that's where God can bring healing and restoration and really can do a miracle that in the natural and in life we don't think is possible. So that's just synopsis.
Aslan, how was the relationship with your father in particular?
It was pretty amazing, I would say. I would say my dad didn't do things with me maybe like a lot of people's dad did, because he was a pastor and because he was always doing some level of ministry. I played sports for a short time. I played baseball, and my dad was like really good about coming to like my games and stuff. My family loved when I played sports. I would say we weren't like so crazy with sports. So I'm the youngest of 5. She's the oldest of 5. The age difference between me and my oldest sister is 16 years, and then she's got a 15-year gap between her and her youngest brother. So it's kind of cool. We're like opposites. But nobody else in my family played sports, just me. And so my family, I think we loved that. We definitely made church priority. Being at church, being at youth group, being at Wednesday night Bible study or whatever it was that we were doing was priority. But I don't think my sports schedule ever conflicted with that. And so I remember my dad being present in those kind of ways. My dad didn't do a whole lot of outdoor stuff with me. And so I would say that maybe that side of my childhood, I didn't have like a dad that like threw a ball with me and stuff all the time. I actually had a sibling that was kind of tomboy, and the sister that's not directly above me, but the one 4 years older than me, really loved playing and throwing baseball and stuff with me. So we were tight in that way, and then we also kind of like hated each other half the time. So it was like we were either trying to kill each other, or it was like, hey, let's play baseball. And I was like, okay, cool. And so, but I would say looking back, I mean, my relationship with my dad was great. I think that there was a very, very high expectation on me. Pretty much, I felt like my whole life as a pastor's kid. It's a very, you hear usually pastors' kids, like they either turn out great or they're like total hellions, and I think that that's probably sometimes because there's like a pressure on them. I remember wanting to grow my hair a certain way. It's probably why I just have like psycho hair now, because I just like don't even know what's happening up there. But I remember I was super into Switchfoot as like a young teen. Oh yeah, big time. Like 12, 13 years old. I was like super into Switchfoot. I love John Foreman.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
How have we never talked about this before?
I don't know, bro. But I loved it.
Even Austin knows.
Yeah, I loved them. And but I remember I wanted to grow my hair out like John Foreman.
Yeah.
And
Like
I remember
surfer
just
dude.
very surfer. And that was just like not cool at all in the church. Like no guys really had long hair. And I remember starting to grow it out, and people in the church would say that I looked like the Beatles. And I'm like, who the heck are the Beatles? Like, I'm trying to look like John Foreman. Can't you see, you losers? What are you talking about? And I remember like some of my friends' parents coming to my mom and being like, my kids are wanting to grow their hair like Aslan's. And like, why are you letting him grow his hair long? It's starting to touch his ears. And me being forced to cut my hair because of other people in the church didn't approve. And so just like weird things like that. And it's funny because like we got over some of those hurdles. I eventually had like a blue mohawk at one point, and my dad just like let it go, but there were definitely some like wars. But I would say that there was a high expectation on me from my dad and my mom to be a certain way. And I think that kind of felt crushing at times. And I think that other people thought I was just like the perfect kid. I think some of my friends were like, well, you're just perfect. You don't have parents that are struggling with like drug abuse or dysfunctional like our parents. And so it felt like there was always this comparison. So there were times where I definitely felt like I didn't have an influence on some of my friends, even though I did, but like they couldn't relate to me. Yeah, I don't know. That's probably not a great like answer, but there was strange pressure for sure that birthed some weird stuff in me for sure.
So that was kind of my next question is like, how has that affected you in your adulthood?
Yeah, I mean, I never like went through like a crazy psycho stage, I'd say, where I was like rebellious or anything like that. Necessarily, I didn't like do drugs and stuff. I mean, I think I tried like things here and there, but I had some friends that really, really went down the wrong paths, and I saw it like really bring destruction to their lives. So I think I kind of prided myself in not smoking or not, even though I had a little phase there where I was like, playing around with smoking cigarettes and stuff like that. I never was like smoking weed. I wasn't like, I had one of my friends was like growing it in their attic, and I was just like, you're crazy, bro. Like, your parents are stupid for not realizing you have pot growing in their attic. Like, they were so naive. But I think that caused me to like basically, try to be a certain way. And then later in life, I think more so in adulthood, I really like lost my mind. Like, went through a period where I just totally lost my mind. So, yeah, I don't know how much we want to talk about my stupidness. But
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. I resonate with that. I was also a PK kid, and I think there was this pressure that's not really talked about. Maybe it is to an extent, but you can go either way. I feel like it's very black and white. It's not always middle ground. It's either crazy or you're good. My question for you, on the contrast of that, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that. Because I know, it actually is very common, a lot more than people even realize or talk about, unfortunately. And I just applaud you for being brave and sharing that. My question for you is, with that happening and your dad stepping past boundaries that should never been crossed, how was your relationship growing up to that point? Was there conversation? Was there a normality, I guess, that was just kind of a facade that was put over you, that pressure to pretend that everything's okay in this relationship? How did you address that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of spiritual manipulation that took place. And so there was this, just this feeling of like, there was communication in the sense that this would never happen again, and using scripture, Paul talks about like, I don't want to do the things that I do, and I do the things that I don't want to do. And so I grew up with a lot of just like, and I was so young until I left for college. And so, it was a long period of time that I was being abused, being manipulated at such a young age that, it was Yeah, so it was just a lot. And I think that, I mean, the way that I dealt with it, which is kind of going into, talking about God the Father. And, for some people, they blame God, and I can see, where there can be this thought process to blame God, like, why me? Why not my siblings? Why not somebody else? Like, why was it just me? And, or God, why did you allow this to happen? Or just all the questions that we have. But the only comfort that I could find was in him. And so even through all of this, it was like, my only secret place, the only place that I felt like I could be me and be real was when I was in his presence, was when I was in the Word. And it was the only comfort and hope that I could find and strength. And then pouring myself into academics. I was like, my dad never graduated high school. My mom got pregnant right out of high school with me. And so... and she wasn't married. They got married, a few weeks before I was born. And so and nobody in my family, like, there's not, I mean, past my generation, yes, like I've got cousins now, but nobody before my generation had gone to college. And so I was determined. And so I think that my mind was just like, I just kept telling myself, I'm going to be smart. And I wasn't naturally smart, but I worked my butt off. And I had 800 students in my class, and not to brag, but I graduated 8th in my class. So it was, I had over a 4.2 GPA. I was straight A student, just like, I just studied. And it was my way of like, and I think that kind of carried into I've seen it where it has carried into my adulthood, where I can easily be a workaholic because it's something that I just like, when things get hard or when struggling, is like I can easily just get busy and just pour into work, or just, get my mind busy on something that's keeping me working, instead of, just going to God or dealing with it. So that's kind of how it affected me growing up.
I can see that, like, things that are kind of a coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. And even if they're good things in the midst of, like, trauma, totally, you kind of realize that as you're getting older, of like, oh yeah, why am I doing this? Like, this is a good thing, but it could be really detrimental for the root of why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Another question I just thought of, because I think it's so interesting how the Lord designs things and, like, relationships, and I can't help but notice too the contrast between both of your stories, but how the Lord knew this, and it's so, like, beautifully, like, detailed and woven. And was that something that was a little bit difficult, if you feel comfortable sharing, of like, he came from this family, that wasn't perfect by any standard, but kind of had that perception of a little bit more normalcy, in the sense of, there was no physical abuse taking place. Totally. Was that hard to kind of grasp with as you married into this family? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was definitely twofold, I would say, because in one hand, I actually grew up with Aslan's, two of his sisters. They were my age. I'm older than Aslan, so for those that don't know. So he grew up with my younger sister, and I grew up with his older sisters. And wow. So I grew up with his sisters, and I so admired Aslan's dad. Like, he was my hero, and I would literally pray, like, Lord, I want him to, like, why couldn't he be my dad? I remember having a father-daughter date night at our church, and I did not want to go. And I cried because I was like, can Aslan sisters, because they were my best friends, I'm like, I just want to go with them and their dad. Like, can he be my dad? I don't want to go with my dad. And so I just remember the struggle, and it's just crazy that, I feel like it was God's, like, gift to me. I remember on our wedding day, I'm riding to our wedding venue, which was, like, on this mountain outside, and I'm stuck in a car for a 45-minute drive with my dad. And I'm just like, this is literally my worst nightmare. On my wedding day, I'm having to drive with my dad, and I'm just feeling all triggered. And I remember, we have our wedding ceremony and all. I'm just like, I can't identify because I haven't, at this point, hadn't walked through really deep healing to understand even like triggers and just like feelings and emotions that I was feeling, other than I feel this anxiety and this insecurity, and I'm just emotionally feeling like I'm a wreck. And we're doing this father-daughter dance. I don't even know what song we were friggin' dancing to, but all of a sudden Aslan's dad just steps in, and I just remember melting in his arms and just feeling like I felt safe. And it was just like God's gift, like here was a desire of my heart, and he became my father-in-law. And without ever knowing that would ever be something that would happen. And so it was like really beautiful. So there's this like beautiful side of like, I feel so blessed that he had this upbringing, but at the same time, because of the brokenness that I experienced, there was this struggle of like, you don't understand what I've been through. You don't understand why I feel the way that I feel. And just like you were saying, like, there comes a place where it's like you have these things that it's really God's design to protect you. There are things that take place in our bodies and our minds that really become adaptive things that really shield us from further damage. And whether that's that, our minds go somewhere else, or things physically actually take place that God designed to protect your body when you walk through brokenness and through abuse. And I can go into crazy stuff about that, but I've read tons of material on it and studies, but it's crazy how God just designs us, and then those same adaptive things, when you get into a marriage, you don't need those. And so getting to a place where it was like, I don't need these things anymore. Like, I need to be able to like lay these things down and allow God to heal me fully, so that I can fully, we can fully be one, and it not be a battle between, hey, you don't understand, or you want to add to?
I think that's great.
Okay.
That was definitely a process.
Yeah, it was a process.
I know that everybody has their own story, and I think that it's important for all of us to kind of reflect on like our own stories with our own fathers, and whether that is an abusive father or not, or that's an absent father, a dad that's just not around. Yeah, exactly. Whether in presence or even emotionally, an absent father can look like a lot of different things. My parents split up when I was 2, and I would spend time with my dad, but my mom remarried when I was 4, and my stepdad was a very harsh man. He was very very hard on me. I remember him saying one time, "It's your mom's job to love you and my job to discipline you." And that was really difficult. I'm thankful that I had my actual father was good when he was around. He was a great dad when he was around. But that was kind of the problem, that he wasn't around a whole lot. So we all kind of have our own stories about our relationship with our fathers in particular. Obviously, with mothers is a whole different story. But tonight, I'm wondering, did either of you? How did your relationship with your father? How did that translate to understanding God as your father? Like, did that affect that relationship? Because I know a lot of people have a hard time with that part of God's character.
Yeah, mine, it absolutely affected me. My dad is probably the most loving guy. I know. I don't think you could outlove my dad. He's naturally like a shepherd is probably how he would like score on like a gift assessment, which is I score very high on as well. My dad like bleeds people, and so but at the same time, the negative side of that is that if people would leave the church, or if people would get offended, or when things blew up in our church, there was a big church split. Some of it involved her family and that whole thing coming out. That as people left, the love that my dad had for people, he would get so offended. And it would like get in his heart in not a good way and get seated, right? And to the point where you could tell he held on to things and really struggled sometimes with forgiveness in areas because he had just given to people, and then they had turned around and it felt like they just slapped him in the face. And so I definitely, I definitely learned because it is very natural, I think, to put our earthly example onto God, for sure, whether it's positive or negative. The good thing for me is that it was positive, the parts of me kind of copying and pasting my, Mark White onto Father God, was that he just loved me so much. I mean, my dad's like the kiss you on the mouth, like kind of relationship we had. Like, no, for real though, like that was so different from her. She was like, that is just so weird. And I'm like, and it might be weird. I get that. But I like my relationship with my dad was so pure-hearted that it was like, he just loves me. And it's like, who cares? Like, he loves me. It's not weird for me. And so I definitely learned God that way from him. And then I think that there were some things that I started to realize that maybe there were some things about God that I didn't fully know that I needed to know, and I kind of almost needed to just experience from God. And that was when I kind of mentioned earlier that I was, pretty much good my whole life, and then I kind of had some knucklehead moments later on down the road. I did later on as we were married. Totally just made some mistakes, and a lot of it was because we were extremely dysfunctional. We were trying to figure this whole thing out. Janelle dealt with a lot of insecurity. I didn't understand it at all. I'm a young guy. Walking into a relationship with Janelle, I thought that I am the perfect guy for her. I am going to be the perfect guy. I have 4 older sisters and my mom. I've been raised by women. I get them. They're and I understand it. And I knew about their story. I knew about her story, and I knew that I still loved her no matter what, and I also loved her family. And so I had this chip on my shoulder that was if there's a guy that's going to be the best husband for Janelle, it's going to be me. Even though I'm younger, I'm going to outdo any other guy that's ever tried to be with her. And then I was just so wrong. Because then we were married, and I was an immature idiot, and we struggled in some major ways just getting along, and all the triggers and stuff that she referred to. And at a certain point in our marriage, I had an affair, and I remember there were some people in my life that were kind of almost giving me excuses, possibly a way out of the marriage, because of how rough things had been for years. And I remember my dad would not let me off the hook. And my dad was like, he wouldn't let me off the hook. And I don't think that I felt like I needed to impress him or anything, but there was a conviction of God, the Father, that came through my dad. And I think that really my true really understanding of God the Father was when I realized that was a piece of, and that he still loved me. That he loved me no matter what. That I was trash because of anybody that should have known better. It's this guy. And that everything that she would go through, and that all of the fears that she had of one day you're going to leave me, and one day you're going to be like these other people in my life that have done me wrong. That was the biggest fear. And it was like, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do that. And then all of a sudden I do that because I give up on doing what's right, or because I get tired of it, or because I think I have a reason to like woe is me because my wife is broken and I have to put up with it. Like, are you kidding me? Like, back then, I wish I could slap young Aslan, like backhand him across the face. I know it's like hardcore, but it's like, dude, there was no justification ever, no matter how disjointed we were. And so anyways, yes, my dad absolutely held a standard, and I experienced God's love in a huge way, in a very real way for myself, when I realized that the lowest of low, that he would still love me and still have a plan for me, and actually still, and then help me and us get through this stuff, which was really a launching pad for the change.
Yeah, wow. I was just thinking, did you want to share? Same question? Did you want to answer the same question?
The question.
Yeah, it's basically like did the relationship with your father affect how you view God, or how you viewed God for a season, or was it hard for you to understand God as Father because of what your father did to you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did. I felt like I viewed God more as a dictator, and if I was, like, I had to be good enough to receive anything from him, and I felt like I was really good at pretending for a long time, and just had a mask of, and not, like, I really had this like inner struggle, because I definitely had like deep relationship with the Lord, and I experienced his presence. And so it was not like, I couldn't deny that he existed. I couldn't deny the presence that I had felt. You know, I couldn't deny that when I was in youth group, I felt his presence during worship, or, you know, I was a part of our dance ministry, and that was like my love language to the Lord. And so there were moments where I felt this closeness, and yet there was this other side where I felt like, am I good enough? Am I meeting your approval? Or is everything that I'm doing, is it just in vain? You know, is it real? Is what I'm feeling real? And so I definitely struggled with this like back and forth. And I remember one time in my bedroom, I'll never forget it. I was really just dealing with major depression. And I remember I'd locked myself up in my room, and I was just not in a good place. And I remember yelling at God, and I was just kind of at, I guess, this moment of like, you're not doing anything, just really struggling with like, if I even believe in you. And I just remember like just screaming like, I don't believe in you. Like, just go away. And I remember feeling like it got so freaking dark in my room. It was like this shadow just hovered over me. And the weight that I felt, it was like he had left me. And I can't really explain it other than it freaked me out. And I immediately just began to sob. And for me, that was like really like this like realization that I need you, despite what I've gone through, despite what I'm going through, I need you. And so there was this like desperation to be close to him, and whatever that meant. And so I just remember just diving into the Word. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I read through the Bible, because it was like my lifeline. I remember I would just read the Psalms over and over, and I'm like, boy, like David really had it crappy, you know. Some were his choices, some not, you know, but he had it really bad. But at the end of every chapter, when you're reading through Psalms, it's like he always ends it with like, God, you're my refuge, or you're my help, or I'm going to praise you, I'm going to thank you. And so it was like there was this hope in me that despite what I'm going through, there's going to be a day where I'm going to praise, and I'm going to be past this. And I'm going to be free. And yeah, and my soul will bless the Lord. And so, like, yeah, there was just this fight in me. And I just remember that was like a really pivotal time in like the realization of like, I love God. I love you. And even though I have moments, and I mean, wasn't perfect, but there was still, I really had this like deep, sensitive, like just desire to please him and to be close to him. It just was honestly just a supernatural thing. It was just, to me, it was a gift from the Lord. And I can't explain it because I know that there have been people that have been through what I've been through or worse. And it takes them a long time to really have a relationship with God or even serve him based off of the brokenness that they've been through. And I just feel like it was like God's hand on my life and grace that kept me close when I could have, because I hated men. I never wanted to get married, never wanted to have kids. There was like certain things that I had, just like word curses that I had even spoken over myself. And I just feel like it was like God's grace to preserve me, where I could have chosen a homosexual lifestyle, and God preserved me. And it was like every time it was just like conviction of the Holy Spirit would rise up, and I believe that it was the time spent in his word that wouldn't allow me to use the brokenness as an excuse. So, yeah.
Wow, that's so good. Thank you for sharing your guys' hearts. I feel like we get 9:07. Okay. I just want to ask one last question, because I think, what would you tell somebody in this room how to respond to some of the like life situations, whether it's been a situation like this with a family member or a friend? Like, how would they address that, or even the contrast of pressure? One thing I just hear, in my heart of sometimes when we are in our early 20s, we don't think that dealing with these things is necessary for where God's taking us. And so my question is, what would you tell those people in this room, having been through what you've been through, especially in marriage? Because a lot of times we think that we can just come into our marriage with undealt with sin. And the reality is the marriage just magnifies the dysfunction. It doesn't go away. You have an addiction to pornography that doesn't go away in marriage just because you can have sex with your spouse.
Right.
It's magnified.
Yeah.
And so it's like sometimes even in Christian circles, we make excuses for these things, for not actually dealing with these and going to the places of deep inner healing, whatever it may be. And I think sometimes we also compare our stories. We're like, well, okay, I haven't gone through that situation, so I don't need to go to counseling or therapy to deal with my resentment and my unforgiveness or my unmet expectations from my own father or my own mother. And it's just not the case. Because a poisoned heart is a poisoned heart, no matter what the situation is. And you're just going to bleed on anybody you're in, relationship, especially a covenant. So that was a long-winded question, but how would you address that guy or a gal? Maybe you can speak to the women and you can speak to the men of like how to do better. Because I think that's what we get to do when we overcome, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. It's not so we just are like, hey, step into dysfunction, the Lord's going to cover you. It's more of like, no, you let this generation do better. Grab a hold of this truth now, before you're in a covenant marriage, before you step into these big things, before you become a parent. And even if you have become a parent, let's seek healthy counseling and accountability, full transparency, and like vulnerability. So maybe you can start.
You want me to start?
Start, yeah.
I would say that my challenge or encouragement would be, I do believe that there are some things that can be worked out in the Spirit. I do believe that there are things that God can work out in and through us if we choose to walk in relationship with Him. And so, but then there are some things that, depending on what the situation is, you need tools. And And so equipping yourself to be able to overcome those struggles, whatever it is. And I know we're specifically talking about, father figure and God the Father. But I would just encourage you in any area of your life that is a struggle, be willing and be brave and courageous to actually face that thing. Because the longer that you ignore it, like buried feelings, buried emotions, they don't die. They don't go away. They will resurface. They do get roots and they grow into a huge monster if they're not dealt with. And unless you're willing to dig out the roots and get to the core of it, then it still has a way of breeding in you and either affecting your life and or the people around you and the relationships that you enter, the marriage that you enter. And so, number one, spending time with Jesus, like every day. We need our daily bread. It's not an option. It's like we need the presence of God. We need the healing of God. We need his grace. We need his mercy. And if you don't see your need for him, that's problem number one. And so really like walking out your relationship with him and really discovering your purpose and the plans that he has for you and allowing him to reveal those things. And then I would say is finding somebody that you can be vulnerable and transparent with, because anything that is left hidden, the enemy will totally play on it. Whether it's just, to you, it could be the simplest thing. Like for me, it was insecurity. I thought that was like no big deal. This is normal. This is who I am. No, it like bred, and there was things that I majorly struggled with that, became anxiety and panic and depression, and it just grew and grew and grew. And just deal with it. Find somebody that you can be vulnerable with, that you can really like air out your dirty laundry, really. That you can be absolutely real and honest. We can be real today because God has done a work in us. Amen. Because he's brought us healing. Yeah. And so find somebody that you can talk to and be open with. Yeah. A godly person.
Yes, amen.
Let me read. A godly person that is going to encourage you and speak truth and life to you. That's not going to just like wipe your tears and let you stay where you're at.
Yeah, come on, that's good.
Yeah, I would say the same. If for those of you that maybe are like going through some type of counseling or go through therapy, if that person's not a believer, you're pretty much wasting your time. Yeah. Like, I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but I just do not see how you can get counsel from anyone that does not know God that is going to give you godly counsel, period. Yeah. And I'll go a step further. If they can be spirit-filled, they should be. Yeah. If you can find somebody that's spirit-filled, counsel with somebody that's spirit-filled, because there's power in being filled with the Holy Spirit, and there are things that Holy Spirit drops in people's hearts that's supernatural, that they have no understanding of, that they will, because God is so kind that he cares for us, and he'll put things on a counselor's heart that would maybe be out of left field for us, and we will never reap those benefits if homeboy or homegirl doesn't even know him. It's the truth. So and that also doesn't mean just like go find people your age, like that are just your support group. Like you need wise counsel. Like that's so true. Like I remember growing up and having like accountability partners. But my accountability partners needed accountability partners. So we were all just like, hey, we'll just be accountable to each other. And then it was like we were all struggling with the same stuff. And nobody just told anybody what was actually happening. And it was like, we did it like a few times. And then it was like radio silence. And it was like, I guess we're just all good. No, we're just all struggling again. And we're just not saying anything about it. Like, that's trash. Don't do that. Find somebody that's older than you and be brutally honest, because you don't just need to confess it. You need some tools as to how to help. The other thing too is if you are at any position of wanting to be in a relationship or in a relationship, and you think that that stuff's going to go away when you get married, you're dead wrong. It's going to get so much worse. It's not even funny. You think that, okay, once this temptation is gone and we're married and we can have sex, it's all going to be fine. BS. It is going to get so much worse. Whatever you're dealing with that you need to deal with is going to get like we struggled before marriage, and we just thought like everybody just wants us to not be together. When we finally get together, everything's going to be okay, and we imploded when we actually got married. It was like, yeah, it was great for a while, and then it was like, wow, all these things are not going away. The insecurity's not going away. Me feeling like I have to walk around in the room and stare at my toes isn't going away. And now all of a sudden we're at each other's throats, and that's not going away. I think also too, it's important to understand that, say you are dealing with something and you have dealt with it as a single person, just be forewarned that then when you do enter into a marriage covenant, there's going to be another layer that you're going to have to go through. Healing is like, it's a giant onion. And I know that you hear that, but like there's layers. There are things that she dealt with before we ever got married. And then we got married and it was a whole new thing. And we had to deal with it. When we have children, we're going to have to deal with a whole other layer when we do have kids, because that's just how it goes. And so, like be okay with like getting help, and don't be like young Aslan, who just thinks that I had enough Jesus in me and I had the best parents and I had the best upbringing and I'm incapable of making mistakes, because I wasn't. I was not exempt from that or immune from messing up. I just wasn't, and I isolated and I didn't do the things that I'm saying that I need to do. I wish it, with everything in me, I wish I could go back. That's one thing that I don't think that I needed in my life, that we did not need to walk through. We just didn't. And it's great now. It's beautiful. God turns things around for good, and he allows us to help other people. That's the truth. And I'll just say too, just because we didn't really say anything about it, but God's done a beautiful things in her family's life through Janelle being bold enough to not only as a young person have those conversations and confront her dad, but actually then years later, when we exploded, it triggered this whole other level of her reading into all the stuff that she did and realizing that, there are very natural things that happen to our bodies when you're trying to when your brain is even trying to protect you. And there are things that are happening, and there's all this stuff that she learned, but through doing that, she got so much freedom on a whole other level that it actually brought freedom to our marriage and healing to our marriage. It actually helped walk us through my affair. And then not only that, but then she got to a place where then her other siblings who had never actually dealt with stuff, who had become very angry people. I mean, like radical stuff happened in her family after they found out of what had taken place, like people making horrible decisions. One of her sisters became a prostitute, y'all, like crazy stuff. A brother who became so angry, he just wanted to kill everybody. And to the point that then she was actually able to help walk them through freedom and actually go back to her parents and completely bring resolve and forgiveness. And that relationship's like never going to be great. But like there's so many people that never actually get to experience or do the things that they've gotten to do, where she can actually be in a room with her dad, like on her wedding day, riding in the car with him. Yeah, that sucked. But like the fact that, that's even a relationship is just crazy. But it's possible because God's good. And
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for sharing, for being vulnerable, for just being the people that you are. We just very much look up to you both, and we just love you so crazy much. And it's an absolute honor to get to serve with you and just be here and be your friends. We love you guys a lot.